It was the 1920s, and the stock market was soaring. Life is perfect, but people didn't see that things were shaky. Farmers were already struggling, and people were spending money that they didn't actually have. People think the Great Depression started on Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929. While this day was the worst day for the stock market, a few days before there were signs. On October 24th, 1929, the stock market lost 11% of its value at the opening bell, according to dailynews.com. This triggered the worst stock market crash in history. On October 29th, 1929, Black Tuesday, the stock market crashed. Workers filled the streets in panic after the crash. About 16 million shares were traded as the panic trading reached its height. Thousands of investors lost their savings after a 5-day panic of heavy trading, leading to the Great Depression, according to dailynews.com. The entire country was affected from that point on. It wasn't just bad for companies. People rushed to banks to get their savings, but the banks were out of money. Over 9,000 banks collapsed, and millions of families lost every and last thing they had.
By 1933, most Americans were out of work. In cities called Hooverville, run-down towns made of cardboard and scrap wood on the side of the street. They were called these because the current president was Herbert Hoover, and they blamed and mocked him because they felt like all of this was his fault, according to webpagehistory.com. Families lived on stew from soup kitchens and waited in line for blocks just for a loaf of bread. For young kids, their lives were changed completely. Thousands of schools closed because they couldn't pay teachers. Many kids had to quit school to work or even ride on trains to find food. And then the weather changed. In the Great Plains, a massive drought created the so-called Dust Bowl. Blizzards of dirt buried houses and killed animals. Millions packed their lives into cars and went west to California, hoping for a better life, but it didn't help.
In 1932, President Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected. He promised a New Deal for the people. Public Works Administration built over 650,000 miles of roads, 125,000 public buildings, and thousands of parks, pools, and bridges, giving over 8 million people jobs, according to Britannica.com. Franklin D. Roosevelt used fireside chats on the radio to talk directly to families, helping them when they had nothing. He created the alphabet agencies, the Civilian Conservation Corps, also known as the CCC, hired young men to plant trees, and the WPA, also known as Works Progress Administration, built roads, bridges, and even some parks we use today. Programs like Social Security were started to help the elderly, and the new laws made sure your money in the bank was safe. While the New Deal helped the Great Depression, didn't fully end until the early 1940s, when World War II began. Factories started up again to build planes and tanks, creating millions of jobs.
The Great Depression didn't just end. It changed how the American government works forever. Before the 1930s, people didn't expect the federal government to step in during a crisis like that. We still see the New Deal all around us. When you visit a state park or drive over certain bridges, you might be using something built by the Civilization Conservation Corps or the Works Progress Administration nearly a century ago. And it's not just buildings. If you put money in a bank today, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation ensures your savings are safe, so you never have to worry about a bank run like families in 1929 did.
The Great Depression wasn't just an American problem, it was a global one. When the U.S. economy crashed, it pulled the rest of the world down with it. It caused all the continents to have an economic crash, and the international trade lowered by 30%, according to digitalhistory.com. To protect their own businesses, countries started putting high taxes or tariffs on goods from other places. But this backfired, making international trade drop by more than 50%. The global hardship changed how people thought about their leaders. In many places, the long years of hunger and unemployment led to big political shifts and even the rise of new, sometimes dangerous governments. Here in the U.S., it forever changed the social contract. Before the 1930s, the government mostly stayed out of the economy. After the New Deal, people expected the federal government to provide a safety net during hard times.
We call them the greatest generation because of how they survived these years. They learned to use what they had, making clothes out of flour sacks and finding joy in simple things when they had no money for toys. They also learned the importance of regulation. Today, the Securities and Exchange Commission watches the stock market, and the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation protects your bank account so the bank runs of 1929 don't happen again. The biggest lesson of all was resilience. Even when 1/4 of the country was out of work, people looked out for their neighbors and kept moving forward. History reminds us that while economies can be shaky, human courage is steady. We build on stuff they laid. Bridges, the parks, the laws that keep us safe today.
The Great Depression didn't just change the laws. It changed the very soul of America. The generation that survived it, the greatest generation, carried those lessons for the rest of their lives. They learned that being thrifty wasn't just a habit. It was a way to survive. Because of the 1930s, we have a social safety net. If you lose your job today, there is unemployment insurance. When you retire, there is Social Security. These weren't just ideas. They were hard-won protections born out of the struggle. It also changed how families work. For the first time, 13 million women became employed, according to History.com. Even children took on new roles, showing a level of responsibility and courage that redefined what it meant to grow up. Today, the buildings, bridges, and parks built by the CCC and the WPA are nearly 100 years old, yet we still walk across them and play in them. They are standing reminders that when a nation is at its lowest, it can build its way back up to the top. The Great Depression lasted a decade and changed the world forever. It taught people about resilience and the importance of looking out for one another. We remember these bad times not just as history, but as a way in how people can reform when all hope seems lost. Thank you for watching.